Hello, this is Chris from Team Phoenix. Welcome back to the channel. So I've got two pieces of health related news for you today, and this involves what you would consider two extremely evil people. Firstly, Chris Watts has apparently got COVID, if we are to believe a piece of footage that's just come out on social media. Appears to be somebody speaking to an inmate at Dodge, an inmate housed where Chris Watts is housed. So I will play that for you now and you can take a listen.
Going to keep your mask on all day, so people were taking their mask off and all that stuff, and I think that's how I got it, because I went down there, I worked 13 hours one day, and I'm like, I'm not wearing this mask all day, and I kept pulling it down, and I was walking up talking to the staff, and I think that's how I got it.
But so Chris Watts got it too?
Yeah, everybody's got it. Everybody on Unit 3 got it, everybody on Unit 4, and that's what unit he's on. He's on 3 right now. They made him the meat man. He's cutting up meat for the whole institution, but now they've been on quarantine. They've been on quarantine for 12 days. They still got, I think they started their quarantine over because I guess a couple more guys on his unit got it.
Mm-hmm.
And so everybody's on quarantine till the 20th now.
Wow.
And so, but it wasn't, I mean, it didn't affect me that much.
So, don't know who the inmate is or who's speaking to them, but so we found out apparently Chris Watts is on, according to this inmate and who they are, is on Unit 3, and all of Unit 3 and 4 have apparently got COVID. Also, his nickname is apparently the Meat Man. He's now got a job cutting up all the meat for all the prisoners. I suppose you could call him the Butcher of Colorado. And they're also all apparently now in quarantine. So that's interesting, isn't it, that Chris Watts allegedly may have COVID. Hopefully, Chris will be struggling to breathe, just like his wife that he strangled and his two daughters that he smothered. Moving on, so big piece of news, the Yorkshire Ripper has died, apparently of COVID. Probably one of the biggest serial killers in the United Kingdom, next to Jack the Ripper. Terrorised the north of England back in the late 70s and early 80s. He was serving life for the murder of 13 women across Yorkshire and the northwest of England over a span of 5 years, from 1975 to 1980. He was also found guilty of the attempted murder of 7 other women. He was convicted in 1981 and he spent 3 decades in Broadmoor Hospital, a high security psychiatric hospital. They believe that he was paranoid schizophrenic at one point. He also spent some time in Parkhurst Prison on the Isle of Wight before he was finally moved to Her Majesty's Prison, Frankland, in County Durham in England. He was a former lorry driver from Bradford, and he died the other day at the University Hospital of North Durham, where he said he was said to have refused treatment for COVID-19. Now, we did also have other significant health problems, including his heart, and his weight had ballooned up to like 20 stone or something due to very, very poor diet. Finally, his lungs failed him This is one of the last pictures of him actually here, that one of his last pictures of him taken out sort of in the public. That was taken in September of 2015. Apparently he had been boasting to pen pals that he wasn't going to catch COVID. Unfortunately for him, fortunately for everybody else, he did, and it killed him. As I say, he killed 13 women across the north west of England. His first victim was Wilma McCann, 28 years old, a mother of 4 from Leeds. She was a prostitute. She was battered to death just yards from her home before Sutcliffe stabbed her in the neck, chest and stomach. Afterwards, he told police, "After that first time, I developed and played up a hatred for prostitutes in order to justify within myself why I had attacked and killed her." Emily Jackson, 11 weeks after murdering Wilma. Emily, also from Leeds and a mother of 3, was picked up by Sutcliffe. She had just begun working part-time as a prostitute. Sutcliffe pretended that his car wouldn't restart when he picked her up, and he battered her with a hammer. He dragged her body into a yard and, using a screwdriver, viciously stabbed her 52 times in the neck, breasts and back. Apparently he stamped so hard on her that he left a boot print on her thigh. Irene Richardson, aged 28, another prostitute that Peter Sutcliffe picked up. He attacked her where they had stopped so that she could go to the toilet. As she crouched down, he delivered 3 heavy blows to her head with a hammer. Then he tore open her jacket and blouse and began to stab and slash her with his Stanley knife. Patricia Atkinson, 32 years old. She was to be Sutcliffe's first victim in his home city, which was Bradford in Yorkshire. She and Sutcliffe had been drinking in a nearby pub before they travelled in his car to her flat, where he inflicted 4 blows to the back of her head with a hammer. He then stabbed Patricia multiple times in the stomach, covering her body with bed linen and leaving behind a boot print on a blood-stained sheet at the scene. Jane McDonald, she was just 16 years old. She was a teenage shop assistant. He attacked her as she walked home from a night out in Leeds after she had missed the last bus. He struck her with a hammer on the back of her head before stabbing her in the chest and back. Her body was later found in an adventure playground by 2 children. She was the youngest victim in his spate of murders. After killing Jane, he then was given the label or the nickname the Yorkshire Ripper for the first time, because he mutilated his victims. Jean Jordan was just 20 years old. October 1977, mother of 2 from Manchester. It's the first time that he had targeted a victim outside of Yorkshire or West Yorkshire. He picked Jean up in the red light district. He attacked her with a hammer in some allotments, dumped her body through her bag. Her bag contained a brand new £5 note that he had given her, which they found, and they traced the serial number on the note to where Peter Sutcliffe worked. He was twice interviewed by police, but he said that he was at a housewarming party at that time. They didn't really follow up on his alibi. Yvonne Pearson was just 21 years old, another young prostitute from Bradford. Sutcliffe took her to waste ground, beat her with a hammer, and then hid her body under a sofa. He had stuffed horsehair from the sofa into her mouth to ensure that she did not make a noise as he kicked her in the head and jumped on her chest. Yvonne's body would not be found for 2 months. As you can probably guess, his weapon of attack was nearly always a hammer. That was what he became known to use. Helen Rick, just 18, she was soliciting in Huddersfield when Peter Sutcliffe picked her up. As she climbed out of his vehicle, he struck her on the head 5 times, stripped off her clothes, and then stabbed her in the chest. Her body was later found under railway arches in a timber yard. Tragically, Helen and her twin sister lived in Huddersfield for only 2 months. She had left Bradford due to their concern over the Ripper murders. Vera Millwood was 40 years old. She was a mother of 7. She was a sex worker. As she got out of her car when Peter picked her up, he attacked her with a hammer before stabbing her with a knife. Although Vera was very frail, she only had 1 lung. She had had numerous operations, and she fought back before she was killed. A man heard screams from the hospital grounds where he had attacked her, but he assumed it had come from a hospital patient. Josephine Whittaker was just 19 years old. She was attacked as she walked home after visiting her grandparents. Her grandmother had been at a church party and returned home late. Josephine was invited to stay the night, but she decided to walk home as she had work the next day. She headed for a park where Sutcliffe hit her head from behind with a hammer, fracturing her skull from ear to ear. Using a screwdriver, he then stabbed her 21 times. Barbara Leach was just 20 years old, a university student. She had been in the pub with friends and stayed after closing time to help the landlord collect empties. As she walked home through Bradford, Peter Sutcliffe pulled over in his car and attacked her with a hammer before stabbing her with the same screwdriver that he had used on Josephine. He stuffed her body underneath the steps leading up to her back door. Once again, he was interviewed by police, but he was not flagged as a suspect. Margarita Wells, she was 47 years old. A civil servant, she worked in the Department of Education and Science near Leeds and had been working late to make up extra hours before going away on holiday the next day. Leaving her office to walk only a half a mile home, she was spotted by Sutcliffe, who stopped his car, attacked her with a hammer, then strangled her with rope. Her almost naked body was found in a garden, partially covered with leaves. Peter Sutcliffe's final victim was Jacqueline Hill, the 13th. She was a student. She was in her 3rd year of her English degree at Leeds University and had been at a seminar in the city centre, catching a bus back to her halls of residence. Walking the final 100 yards, she was followed by Sutcliffe, who hit her on the head and stabbed her. She suffered 4 skull fractures. As I said, he was also found guilty of the attempted murder of 7 other women. And there are a few women that actually survived his attacks. Well, they believe, it was Peter Sutcliffe because they were attacked with a hammer. I can only hope that in his death that surviving victims and children of the victims can feel some kind of good feeling out of this, that he is finally now dead. A truly evil, psychopathic man. Never known anyone quite like him, certainly in the United Kingdom. The terror and fear that he caused across to women, particularly prostitutes and sex workers across Yorkshire and the northwest of England was just unbelievable. And I was only young at the time, but I still remember it now. And that is one truly psychotic man. But thankfully, he is now no more.